Karmelo Anthony murdered Austin Metcalf. There is no other way to slice it.
A lot of black people believe that what Karmelo Anthony did was right. If the roles were reversed, all hell would break loose. Every black parent, every black person would be screaming life in prison, the death penalty. People would definitely be screaming just racism, racism, racism. This is how I see it. A lot of black people are biased. Y'all showed the whole world that no matter what a black person do against a white person, that black person is always right.
So today, Texas authorities have released the security cam footage of Karmelo Anthony stabbing Austin Metcalf, and this is very useful because it quite unsurprisingly proves that the jury's verdict was indeed correct, and everything that the race communists and black activists were saying about this was a complete lie. No, he was not being jumped or swarmed by a crowd of people. He was not pinned down with no escape. There wasn't this brutal 4-minute long fight and assault going on. Quite literally, Karmelo Anthony just stabbed Austin Metcalf for no justifiable reason and then ran away. This is something that was already established in the court of law, but we had so many characters lying about it. Even Jasmine Crockett and other morons were caught in even more minor lies that just show, though, none of their narrative about this was true. For example, the knife here in question was not some type of tiny 1-inch long box cutter. And by the way, Jasmine Crockett, it wasn't even pouring rain as you described. Like, even the little trivial details like this, please take notes of that, folks, that the black race hustlers try to use to justify all of this, like down to the major details to the minor details. These people are just completely lying about everything, which shouldn't be surprising. And how fitting is it that this all dropped on Juneteenth, the fake holiday that they astroturfed into existence on a national level with yet more lies? I mean, the symbolism of that is just so fitting. But anyways, let's discuss this. We'll break it down. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, it is true that the video here is rather blurry. It needed to be enhanced in the courtroom, but still, we can actually use this as yet more evidence that just backs up what we already know, right? We're not even learning anything new. It's just full confirmation. Here's how the story was described. Here's what the court ruled. Oh, we saw the video that backs it up entirely. But that said, let's take a look at what the black activists are saying about it first. And then you'll notice the insane levels of cognitive dissonance. You know, you would think at a certain level, these people ought to just shut up. But we know full and well, this was never about justice. This was never about them reviewing the evidence or the facts of this case. As we said from day one, Karmelo Anthony was black, Austin Metcalf was white. These people on an ideological and maybe even personal level believe that it's morally okay to kill white people for whatever racial grievance they have, and that's at the center of this. But what's interesting is that when they try to do the mental gymnastics to justify, no, it wasn't about that, here's my legal expert opinion on this, you notice how completely stupid these people are and just wrong, and that includes people with alleged law degrees like Jasmine Crockett herself. But anyways, so Tariq Nasheed, for example, one of the A-grade race hustlers here, describes it as the following, and I want you to kind of take notes of this, and then we'll review the actual video. So he says that distant security footage video has been released of Karmelo Anthony defending himself from Austin Metcalf attacking him, okay? As you can see in this video, Karmelo was surrounded under the tent with no way to escape. As Austin was standing over Karmelo attacking him, Karmelo neutralized the threat using self-defense, and Karmelo had to run up the stairs to escape further danger because he was clearly boxed in from running down the stairs. This is clearly self-defense. And so we'll play the video that shows everything is wrong, but you notice even the ridiculous contradictions being stated in this video alone. First of all, he's saying that Karmelo had no way to escape. He was cornered, he was pinned in, and that's why it's self-defense. And then later admits Karmelo had a clear way to escape, which was just running up the stairs instead of down the stairs because the rest of the team were at the bottom of the stairs. To which I say, oh, so you mean to tell me Karmelo always had a way to escape and he wasn't being pinned in? What on earth are you even talking about? But anyways, so supposedly this video is going to be clear proof of self-defense. Let's play the video for everyone to see, and you can check it out for yourself. So keep in mind, you're about to see, this is very blurry, but you're about to see Karmelo Anthony will be highlighted up here if you're watching where my mouse is on the screen as he flees the scene. And supposedly the black race hustlers believe this is their evidence. Let's check it out, guys. Okay. So you can see this is where the scene will take place right here, where my mouse is. So just follow that. We have a discussion going on. Oh, and then there's a little bit of pushing. And then there's Karmelo Anthony just running away. Okay. So already you notice several different things are true. You know, first of all, the guy just running, fleeing the scene. Okay, whatever. But let's not forget, again, we were told about this story. There was a fight. Karmelo was getting assaulted and he was getting jumped and swarmed, and that's why he had to defend himself. Watch on video again. Where do you see any of that, right? There's some figures right here. It looks like everyone's basically just standing around. You'll notice that almost like a lockup occurs where they kind of just shove each other for about 2 seconds, and then Karmelo runs away. The implication there, obviously, by what we know, being that he ended up stabbing him over this. Okay, so let's take a look. I mean, what are we talking about? Where's the 4-minute fight, by the way? What is this, right? Literally, the shoving starts for about a second. Already Karmelo stabbing. By the way, as you can see, where's the swarming? Okay, I guess you could say to an extent it's a crowded tent, and so the way down directly, these bleachers would have been hard, but you can clearly see he has an escape path up, which is the path he ended up taking. He can simply walk around and walk down the bleachers. There were many ways out, and by the way, even Tariq Nasheed's excuse here is completely contradicting the Jasmine Crockett excuse, which is that, oh, he didn't want to leave because it was pouring rain. Well, first of all, where's the pouring rain, Jasmine Crockett? And secondly, I seem to notice he's not being swarmed by anyone. It's, you know, there's a verbal dispute going on. Sure, they start shoving each other momentarily, but what are these people talking about? Where's the assault? Where's the swarming? Where's the jumping? Well, again, is it exactly surprising to find out these people just straight up lied? That's all they do. They just straight up lie. And then somehow they think we're so dumb, we're going to watch that video and just assume to ourselves, oh, wow, clearly you're so right. Although let's not forget, these are the same exact activists who, you know, literally in cases where a black suspect sometimes pulls out a gun or a knife on the police officer does exactly what they have to do. They'll, you know, bring up the same type of nonsense, the same type of arguments. Oh, well, that was, you know, the police shot him for no reason. So understanding the very twisted worldview they live in, where again, it's like this very tribalistic clan warfare mentality that everything our tribe does must be automatically okay. I guess it makes sense to them if Tariq Nasheed is pandering to that audience of people who like are fundamentally irrational. They don't actually care. They just celebrate. They have a bloodlust against white people. Then I guess that makes sense. But from everything we can see as neutral observers, right, who are actually trying to get to the bottom of the case, we don't seem to see the evidence of any of that, of the 4-minute long fight, of the jumping going on here, like literally within seconds of Austin Metcalf. Like, he's not, you know, I would even say to an extent the shoving is exaggerated, because it's not exactly like he's shoving him to the ground or anything like that. He's literally just doing this, like, bro, get out of here. And then immediately Karmelo, who we know per witness accounts was threatening the entire time, right? Oh, try and do something, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's literally the one making the threats, daring Austin Metcalf to lay hands on him. And then, you know, clearly you can see just he was wanting to stab the guy the entire time. And just because, oh, well, Karmelo expressed regret afterward. Well, so, okay, so you mean to tell me that because he knew he realized he was in trouble, that just means that we should take away the murder charge, right? What an interesting loophole that black race hustlers seem to have or believe exists around murder. It's just so ridiculous. And, you know, we can see it, right? We can see it. So very brief interaction. He swings the blade and then runs. Yes, exactly. Karmelo can be seen running away from the tent after stabbing. There's no obvious scuffle prior to the murder, despite the race hustlers making all these claims. But again, guys, it should not exactly be surprising that these people were just straight up lying. How about Jasmine Crockett, by the way? Anyone recall when she tried to argue that Karmelo was not using a deadly weapon because the blade was too short or something, as if that's how the legal or even logical justification of or classification of a deadly weapon even works? Well, would it surprise anyone to also find out she was completely wrong, right? As I said, they are lying about both the big details of, hey, guilty, not guilty, and even the small details that they're basically inventing to rationalize Karmelo Anthony's actions to make it sound not as bad. Even those, they're lying. Top to bottom, there's not a single aspect of the narrative here that the race communists are correct about, and every piece of forensic evidence continues to prove them wrong, but they continue to exist, literally, and this is what they actually principally believe: black people have the right to murder white people, and it's that simple for them. But anyways, let's recall this, and then we'll show you the actual supposed multi-tool box cutter thing, whatever that Jasmine Crockett claimed that it was.
Wait a minute, was it a switch? I don't know what he had.
It was like it seemed like it was a multi-tool, almost like a Swiss Army.
Like with the like with the little scissors and everything and whatever. So it was small. Well, I would have argued the size of it alone, you wouldn't even think it's a deadly weapon.
And that's
forgot
why
he had the bag.
If it was one of the little, like I don't know, like I do think.
Well, that's why he went to his coach and was like, but I don't think I heard him.
So it's worth remembering that even at the time, this was ridiculously stupid. And this woman, Jasmine Crockett, by the way, purports to be a lawyer. She has a law degree, and that's her justification. Oh, it wasn't a deadly weapon because it was small. Hey, Jasmine, you know how we know it's a deadly weapon? Because it killed somebody. Basically, anything can be a deadly weapon if it has the potential or it is used ultimately to kill somebody, right? A car can be a deadly weapon. A frying pan can be a deadly weapon. Many things can if, guess what? It killed someone. So you say, oh, it's not a deadly weapon because it's small. The size doesn't matter. You killed someone. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of something out of the movies, but for example, let's just hypothetically say if you use a poison dart, which are those actually a thing? But okay, if you use a poison dart to kill someone, is it not a deadly weapon? Did you not commit murder because yes, you killed that person, but it was small, so it doesn't count? What are you talking about? Even if you use your fists and beat somebody and take their life that way, okay, I guess there's no deadly weapon involved there, but guess what? You murdered that person. Like that would be the charge, okay? So if you strangle someone, that like, so what are we even talking about? It's actually very stupid semantics to argue about the size of the blade, because the point is the blade ended up taking somebody's life. Therefore, it's a deadly weapon. Therefore, under these circumstances where we understand there was no justifiable or rational self-defense that took place, there was no reasonable fear that Karmelo Anthony had for his life, that is all completely made up. Yes, therefore, it is murder. This is how the law actually works, Jasmine. Very impressive that you have a law degree and I don't, and somehow, I don't know, clearly your degree didn't really go anywhere, and the jury and the court all seem to agree. All of that in mind, though. So this was described as a multi-tool. Okay, well, fittingly in response, authorities have also released the image of the knife, of the blade that Karmelo Anthony used. And, well, if you're listening, I encourage you to look at the screen right now and ask yourself if that's how Jasmine Crockett and her friends were describing it. Oh, it's a multi-tool. I don't know. What do you expect to see? A box cutter, a really tiny Swiss Army knife or something? No, it's actually just like your standard tactical knife. And I guess if it's under 4 inches, typically these are legal to carry and stuff like that. Sure, you could argue that. However, I'd like to remind everyone, these kids are in high school. I don't know what the specific rules of high school are there, but from what I gather, it's not that different from when I was in high school, which was that it doesn't matter if, you know, it's under 4 inches. You're not allowed to carry a knife at school. We weren't even allowed to carry big scissors around at school, right? Like that was something that's taken seriously. We're not even allowed to carry box cutters around. And yet this, I mean, first of all, just looking at this knife, it's a standard tactical knife. Can a tactical knife kill somebody? Yes, absolutely. Common sense. I mean, even just looking at it, you're like, yeah, if that was used in a certain area, a certain way, absolutely, that could take somebody's life. But, you know, according to Jasmine Crockett, No, no. I mean, because Carmelo didn't think that it would take somebody's life, he's completely justified, and therefore, I guess all charges should be dropped. Because sure, he may have been carrying a knife, he may have acted in a way that's not remotely rational self-defense, killed a guy in cold blood, but because he claims that he didn't mean to do it that badly or something, even though the kid is dead, let's just drop all charges because the guy is black. That is their understanding of the law. But just something I wanted to point out as well. So that's what they said can't even remotely, it's illogical to be classified as a deadly weapon. Funny how they lied about everything, everything. Please present me one piece of the race communist narrative that has been even correct about this, Very fitting. They just lie from start to finish and then use that as a justification to do what? What have we seen them do since? Jump and harass random white people, vow for racial retribution, vow for race war, all things based on completely fabricated lies, but I'm not sure these people actually care because, hey, it wouldn't be race communism if it was not all entirely based on lies, on fake history, on revisionism. This is what they do with all of American history, by the way, even something like Juneteenth, which is, of course, today. And while we're on the subject, I just also want people to remember, let's actually just take a quick trip down memory lane before we close the video, how this holiday came to existence. And it's actually a stark reminder of how bad things were not too long ago. I mean, let's be honest, if this trial happened in 2020, would Karmelo Anthony actually have been found guilty? I like to believe so. It's Texas and all that, but just remembering how insane the country was and something that feels like a fever dream now, but we should remember was not that long ago, I'm not exactly sure. But let's not forget, folks, this was the exact day just 6 years ago. Do you remember why Juneteenth became a thing? Let's not forget this. It was because the race communists, and keep in mind, this was just weeks after George Floyd. This is when they're burning down the country and calling it mostly peaceful protests and calling it justified as they're committing violence in the streets, beating people like David Dorn to death, just total chaos, and every liberal institution's running cover for mass political violence, which is funny because years later they seem to do the exact same thing. But anyways, if you recall, Donald Trump, after watching all of this, decided on June 19th, 2020, that he wanted to do a political rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I also want you to remember that how crazy the world was back then and how far we've come, by the way. Remember they were saying no public gatherings, no sporting events, you have to stay home, everybody has to stay apart, no crowds. And then because George Floyd happened, they suddenly changed the rules of how coronavirus worked, right? They said, 6 feet social distancing, but if you're at a protest, it's okay. If you're protesting in favor of a fentanyl addict and for the race communists, then therefore you can't spread coronavirus. Remember this stuff? It was that crazy, right? So in response to that, oh, look, the libtards get to do their political rallies. Trump says, okay, then I'm going to do my Trump rally in Oklahoma. They first of all tried to counter it by saying, oh, Trump is spreading COVID. Oh, all the BLM riots were spreading COVID, all the mass protesting. But, Trump, how dare he do that? But then what they ended up basically inventing here was this obscure holiday known as Juneteenth that nobody had ever heard of outside of the state of Texas. It was unknown to everybody nationally. Don't pretend now like you knew what it was this whole time. Nobody did. And they basically said that Trump can't do the Tulsa rally because that's so disrespectful to black people because it's Juneteenth, this holiday that nobody has ever heard of. And by the way, it's a Texas holiday. The rally was taking place in Oklahoma. What does that have to do with anything? But then they tried to say also that Trump is doing something related to lynching and all this because, basically Trump is invoking the same racism as the Tulsa race riots and all that stuff that took place in the 1920s. Why? Nobody knows, just because, he did a rally on Juneteenth. Like, it didn't even make any sense. But if you remember, the national outrage over this was so bad, and this is how different things were back then, Trump had to actually cancel this and reschedule it, all because the race communists literally just invented this stupid fake holiday for absolutely no reason and weaponized it as one of their many ploys to quote-unquote borrow the 2020 election. Anyone remember how insane that is? What's crazy is that if this exact thing happened today, Trump honestly probably would not reschedule anything. Nobody would care because, peak woke is over. We get all that. But like, just remember, not too long ago, and this is how the country would be if we lost in 2024, still to this day, this was the type of BS we're dealing with. A bunch of crazy BLM race communists get to just move stuff based on rules they made up themselves. And all the while they're burning down the country. But how dare Trump do a rally on a day that nobody has ever heard of? And then the next year, Joe Biden gets inaugurated under questionable circumstances. And over the course of 2021 peak woke, the Democrats and most of the Republican Party, let's not forget this, okay, just force this federal holiday into existence. If I recall, it was only like 8 Republicans as a whole that ended up voting against the Juneteenth National Independence Day thing, which, very problematic for America to declare 2 Independence Days anyways. But even then, like, please remember, this whole thing was so forced. It is so contrived. It is, I would argue, basically a fake holiday. Not to say that it's not a real holiday in Texas, but nationally, the race communists literally invented this thing to help take down Trump and stir more BLM outrage for the 2020 election. And then the year later, the entire GOP is just forced to accept this and vote it into place as a national and federal holiday. And then people ask me, why do you have such a problem with this being a federal holiday? Because I remember how this all came into place, and it's a disgrace to this day that we just went along with that. We just allowed the communists to invent this holiday out of existence under such ridiculous, absurd circumstances. But all of that in mind, I think it's a good reminder, okay? Because I don't think, honestly, we remember enough how bad things used to be. All these, especially newcomers to politics who think they're super red-pilled because, hey, don't you know, Trump is working for the Zog or Israel or whatever, the Epstein this, Epstein that, whatever, right? Who claim to be right-wing, but, just don't even know what they're talking about. A lot of these people were not in the trenches back then. You can have your criticisms of Trump. You don't like this or that of the presidency. I get it. But I think that man deserves serious gratitude because we don't remember how things used to be, at least not enough people, okay? And as someone who was very active in politics and is doing the same stuff now that I'm doing back then, I remember this. I remember being in the trenches. I remember how bad all of this stuff was. And you wonder, and sometimes people wonder, why are you so ride or die for Trump? Why are you still with this after all these years? Because I know what we came from and where we are now, right? I remember social media censorship. It's funny, so many of the newcomer kids nowadays involved in the sphere, and they're like the neo-never-Trumpers, as I call them, right? They don't even know what that was like. They don't understand where we came from. And by the way, why it is so fundamentally dangerous and what could happen again, right? Peak woke feels like it was a long time ago. It feels like a fever dream now. What could come back if the right wing doesn't value victory? If we don't play to win, if we don't make our top goal, making sure Democrats do not take political office, these days are not too far away in the future, right? Just look at the race communists around Karmelo Anthony. We're lucky. We're extremely blessed. They don't have the power they used to, because if they did, if this happened just a few years ago, Karmelo Anthony probably gets acquitted. It's probably a hung jury at the very least. And if it wasn't, you would see mass riots taking place, and the Democrat Party as a whole institutionally, instead of ignoring this case, would be all standing with Karmelo Anthony. Things would just be infinitely worse. And so I'm grateful for that. But we also have to understand those people are still here. You see them still here. They're actually acting almost crazier than they did back in 2020. They just don't have power. What do you think happens when they regain power? Something to remember about all of this. And I just wanted to use Juneteenth, that whole psyop, that whole nonsensical thing, as a reminder of how bad it's going to be if these people take back power. I'm ready for it. I've been there before. We've done it before, right? Veteran of the game, you could say. But I just want all these new heads, these newcomers to politics who think they're so cool because they discovered Israel for the first time last year or something as a political issue, that are constantly virtue signaling and grandstanding against Trump and all this, and they don't really know what's going on, and some of them want to vote Democrat in order to boycott the right wing, and they think, oh, that'll fix the country because so-and-so stupid commentator on the internet told me to do that. you don't know what it's like when Democrats have power. And I hope for all of our sakes, you don't have to live through that again, okay? When Joe Biden was throwing a bunch of people I know in jail and trying to do all this stuff and persecute us, what were you doing? I don't know. You were just applying to college innocently. I had to apply to college with the knowledge that like this happened right after January 6th and it's all going to be used against me and all this. You're just, carefree, partying, sports gambling. Now you're going to come to politics not even knowing what any of this was like and pretend as if you're this high and mighty force who like knows things and has experience. You don't even know the first about it. You know what I'm saying, right? So just something all right-wingers need to remember, okay? I know it feels like a distant memory now. Please remember peak woke. Please do. Don't forget it ever, okay? Because we can't, first of all, let the left off the hook for what they did. But then secondly, do not let these people ever do it again, which means do not hand them political victory ever again. I'm just saying. But that said, let me know your thoughts on all of this, guys, in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.